this. Here we All right, so I will have like a way to go back and verify and stuff. All right. Yeah, he took advantage of the World's Fair. That's how he was able to get away with it for so long because there were so many people going there and not being traced. If he knew that what he was doing is wrong, why did he keep doing it? Well, because he was corrupt and, you know, wanted the money. A lot of you guys still haven't commented. Make sure you do comment. That's worth 2 points, and it's really easy 2 points to get the bell ringer. Why did he have mental health issues causing him to do what he did? He probably was a psychopath. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the serial forensic psychology unit, which is also the serial killer unit. But he seemed to have no remorse and no feelings of guilt. He did say that he loved one woman, if you remember that part of the video, but that was the only person that he really, and I think he killed her anyway. So yeah, that's not normal behavior. Um, yeah, I think he was more a psychopath because he was able to, good question, Isabel, because he was so organized and he cleaned up his crime scene so well, hid his crime so well. Uh, I do think he was a psychopath. Sorry, guys. Let me get a coffee. Let me get a drink real quick. All right. Anyone else have any questions or comments about that before? Oh, how did he get the money to build the hotel? Good question, Blake. So he he had that first insurance fraud case that I think he got $10,000 from, where he was going to pretend to kill his friend, but then he just killed him. Um, and then he also took out loans to pay for the hotel. So he used that $10,000, and then he borrowed money, and he was paying those people back with the money he got from the corpses to pay for the loans. But he also didn't pay everyone back. He had one of his main investors that I believe he killed to get out of paying him back. So who snitched on him for being married? I don't know, Wyatt. That's a good question. It may have just been in the records, but I don't know how well the records were back then. So that's a good question. I don't know. Anyone else have any questions or comments about the H. Holmes case? Or the Herman Webster Mudgett case, I guess would be the way that usually we don't refer to people by their pseudonym, but he tends to get referred to as H. Holmes. All right. If there's no other questions or comments, let's go ahead and get started with the lecture today. Let me share my screen with you and kind of show you what we're doing. Um, all right, so this is sorry, these are your comments. This is the homepage of Canvas. What we're going to do today is we're going to start taking some toxicology guided notes. Now, I posted the toxicology reading guide to Canvas simply so that you could print it out. We're not going to work on the reading guide today. But I thought you might want to have a chance to print out the reading guide. So it's a PDF. It's kind of a longer one. We'll take most of the 2 weeks doing it that we're online, and it is interesting stuff though. So if you want to print that out and have that ready for next class, that would be a good idea. That's why that's there. But what we're actually doing today is these drug classes and drug types guided notes. It's kind of an introduction to toxicology, if you will. We just kind of go over some of the most common drugs and toxins, classify them by the way they act on the body, and classify them by their addiction potential. And then we'll talk more about like how they interact with the body in a different lecture. So if you want to know what notes you need to take, oh, I got something in the chat. Um, Sorry, let me pull this down. There we go. You yeah, if these are the notes, so you can print them out, or you can just take them on a freehand piece of paper. Oh no, sorry, that's the slides. These are the guided notes here. Um, it's just a table, and so it's not like there's a ton written on it. So if you want to just do it in a notebook, that's totally fine. There's 8 drug categories we're going to go over. We'll probably only get through like 2 or 3 today. Usually students have a number of questions about these drugs. This is, there's really several classes that you'll get, well, you have the opportunity to learn about illicit and legal drugs and what they do to the body. This class, I think they talk about it somewhat in health, which you've all taken already. And then if you like this stuff, take Osborne's genetics and toxicology class because he goes into more detail. Then he does it for like a whole quarter. We only do it for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So anyway, does everyone have a way to take notes? If you want to just do it in like a Google Doc, that's fine. If you want to download the PDF and print it out, that's fine. Or if you want to just take it freehand, it's also fine. So let's go ahead and get started with the lecture. So this is the PDF. You don't have to write this down. I don't really think this is that important, but it is in the standards of the state standards. So the guy that was considered the father of toxicology was named Mateo Ortega. He was a Spanish chemist. And that's all I'm going to say about that. We're not going to get too much into the history of toxicology, even though it is actually quite interesting. What we're going to talk about primarily today is the way that your body responds to the presence of these drugs, and then give you examples of the drugs. We'll talk later about how they're absorbed by the body, how they're distributed, and then how they are eliminated. And how long it takes to eliminate them, because that can be an important factor for like drug tests and stuff like that. So forensic toxicology really involves the testing of body fluids. Can be hair even. Your hair will have a history of the drug use that you have experienced, and or your tissues, urine, blood. All those things can have remnants of the drugs that you've been exposed to, and they look at that to try to determine if it influenced your behavior, or whether it was like a driving under the influence type of situation, or a crime that you committed. Just because you're on drugs when you commit a crime, that does not mean you're not responsible for that crime. Being on drugs is not an excuse to commit crime, and you're still held responsible. The first class, so this would go in these guided notes. Let me, this would go right here on this very first box. Stimulants is the drug category. And then we'll talk about the physiological effect and some examples. So stimulants are also called uppers or speed. Not all of them are called speed. The ones that are generally referred to as speed are the ADHD medications like amphetamines, Ritalin, and Cylert. These are 3 drugs that are prescribed for ADHD. And if you take them without a subscription, or out of prescription, then it's like using illegal drugs, and a lot of people call it speed in that case. Where those drugs are abused by people a lot of times is college campuses. People that need to study long hours will sometimes abuse those drugs. They're not necessarily, what would this go? would this go in the example box? Yeah, these are the examples: cocaine, methamphetamines, amphetamines, Ritalin, Cylert, caffeine, and nicotine. And we'll talk about what they do to the body in a second, but what they basically do is they give you a boost of energy. And some of them can make you feel extremely confident, or grandiose is the word that we use, to the point where like you almost become delusional about your abilities. So go ahead and write some of these examples down. I'll give you a second, and then we'll talk about the effects of stimulants on this next slide. Um, the one that kind of makes people the most grandiose is cocaine. Cocaine is a powder that is usually inhaled through the nose, but it could also be smoked as crack cocaine. Um, and it gives people a boost of energy and a really like a lot of confidence, to the point where like we'll watch this video probably next class where these people take the drugs and then we watch them do different activities. And the cocaine user uses cocaine, and then the next thing he says is, "Yeah, give me a week with this stuff, and I'll be sitting in the White House." Like he's going to be president in a week because of the cocaine use. And that's just an example of how these people get these grandiose ideas. Anyone need more time with this slide on stimulants? It's
Yeah.
like, yes. If you need to, you have access to the PDF, so you can go back. So let's move on to the effects. And these are the effects. So alert, confident, energetic, racing speech and thoughts. So you can kind of, if you know what to look for, you can tell if somebody's on a stimulant. They'd speak faster. Their thoughts are a little bit disjointed, but they're moving really fast. What happens with these uppers, and I'm going to draw on this for a second, we'll see how well I can do, is it says paranoia and a low or crash. And what that's referring to is after. So if this is a graph here and you've got energy, like the person's energy on this side, and time down here, what happens when you take a stimulant is it gives you a boost of energy, and then you come down and you crash. So you started out here with your energy, and you went up here for a while, and this is the high of the stimulant, and then you end up down here below. Now, if you have ADHD and you are prescribed that medicine, then this is not the way it impacts you. It impacts you differently. But if you don't have ADHD, and or you're using the illicit drugs, then this is the way it'll impact you. So you do end up with paranoia can happen even when they have racing speech and thoughts, but oftentimes the lower the crash is the after effects. They are associated with the loss of appetite, and they can actually, in some cases, increase your physical strength for a short period of time. Anyone need more time on this slide? Please jump in with comments or questions if you have them.
Yeah, I need some more time.
Okay. One thing I wanted to add I'll add that in a second. We got some graphs and some charts coming up that will lead me to those comments. Some of you guys, I can't see you. You're going to be marked absent. You need to be in the camera. There we go. Thank you.
I'm good. I'm just drawing a box.
All right, so let's go. Anyone else need more time? Okay, let's move on. This is just this chart here. Let me delete my annotations. This just shows how many people use different drugs. So, and this is a little bit old. This tobacco one has decreased a little bit, but tobacco is by far the most abused drug in the United States. And that's a combination of cigarettes and vape pens, as well as the nicotine gum. Nicotine gum doesn't isn't tobacco, so I don't know if that would count. But anyway, these people are addicted to nicotine, which is a stimulant. Alcohol is the second most abused drug in the world, um, after tobacco, and those two are obviously legal once you're of age of 21. And then we're talking about the other drugs are used kind of relatively a lot less, but they're more harmful, and so that's why we talk a lot about the other drugs. This is cocaine use on this side, on the right side, and meth use on the left side. And one thing you'll notice is Utah's relatively low in cocaine use, but we're relatively high in meth use. That is slowly changing. Cocaine tends to be a drug abused by people that are wealthy. And as Utah becomes a more affluent state with people from California and Texas and this like moving here, our rates of cocaine use go up, and our rates of meth use stay about the same. Um, the in like if you went to somewhere like Park City, you'd probably see more cocaine used. If you go to somewhere like Price, Utah, rural Utah, you'd see a lot higher percentage of meth users. So meth is a more rural drug than cocaine. And those are just tendencies, not hard and fast rules. This is how we get methamphetamine gets to the United States. A lot of it is made in the United States. I'll show you a meth lab picture in a minute. Some of it is also made in like Mexico and Central America and comes up through the border. This is how the drug passes through the country. Methamphetamines tends to come again across the border or in different rural areas during the United States, and it kind of follows the freeways. So like I-15, I-70, I-80, these are all major routes for methamphetamine transport. Here's a meth lab. This would be a like a meth lab in the United States. It's really just kind of like somebody's home chemistry lab. They are not clean. There is like no nobody checking to see how pure the drugs are that are being made. So meth can be very, very harmful because of the impurities in it. It's harmful no matter what, but oftentimes you're getting it homemade from somebody. There's things like paint thinner and in methamphetamine that are obviously extraordinarily destructive to the brain. Meth is one of the more harmful drugs on you physically. Um, these are some more. This is kind of like how it is cut or made or even injected at times. Meth is generally smoked, but it can also be shot up. Um, and I don't know if it can be snorted, but I'm not sure about that. This is meth mouth. What happens to people with meth is it dries out their mouth, which is hard on your teeth. And then also they tend to drink just tons of Mountain Dew, sugary soda, and they don't brush their teeth. They're awake a lot and it just destroys their teeth. Meth will age you faster than just about any drug. This is a lady that used meth for 10 years, and you can see, really by about the sixth, seventh year, she's kind of almost unrecognizable. Gets these pits in her cheeks and really just damaging every aspect of their body. One thing about meth use, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about drug classes as opposed or schedules, sorry, drug schedules as opposed to drug classes, is meth is one of these drugs that is supposed to be well, basically let me introduce it this way. There are two types of addiction that somebody can have. One is mental. You can be mentally addicted to something. The other one is a physical addiction. If you're physically addicted, then you need the drug to to not be sick. So think of like a longtime alcoholic or heroin abuser. These people need those drugs or else they are physically ill. Meth, sorry, I need a Kleenex. Meth is not, and cocaine and most of these drugs are not physically addictive, although nicotine is. Um, they're more mentally addictive, meaning that you may not get sick if you don't have it, but you're gonna feel like you just are off. You're gonna feel crappy without it. You're not gonna feel like you're enjoying things as much. You're gonna be mentally addicted to the drug. And the scary thing about meth, and I used to work at a drug rehab clinic, it was primarily for opioid addiction, but the guy that was in charge of the clinic was an ex-meth user. And he kind of told me some stories about meth use. And what he said is that you can get mentally addicted to meth in just one use. Yes, Cohen.
Is physical addiction what causes withdrawals?
Yes, physical addiction causes withdrawals. And so if you like a meth user that quits isn't going to get physically sick. They're not going to have those physical withdrawal symptoms, but they will feel like a massive craving for the drug and they're going to feel like they can't enjoy things. You hear people that use meth say they just don't enjoy things. They don't get pleasure out of things anymore once they quit. And so meth is a very, very dangerous drug. Cocaine, also very dangerous. Um, a difference between cocaine and meth users, and this is not always the case, but as a generality, is meth users tend to use it like every day. Cocaine users don't always do that. Sometimes they just use it occasionally. And, you know, it's still harmful, but if you're not using it that often, it's not going to be as harmful as if you're using it every day, obviously. Good question. Anyone else have any questions about meth or cocaine? We will come back and talk more about these drugs later, but this is kind of just an introduction to stimulants for now. No? All right. Let's go on to depressants. So this will be the second class of drugs. And these are downers. So they depress or suppress the activity of the central nervous system. Oh, sorry. One last thing about stimulants. These are uppers. What do you think the symptoms of like an overdose on stimulants would be? You can type it in or you can answer. What does anyone want to guess?
What was the question again?
What would the symptoms of a drug overdose on like meth or cocaine be?
Would it be too hyper?
Yeah,
Like over?
and overstimulation, you can have a heart attack. Your heart rate can be
Cardiac arrest.
cardiac arrest. Yes, Wyatt, exactly. Or stroke because your blood pressure is increased. Um, those are ways that you can die acutely of abusing these drugs, even though overdose of these drugs is not as common as overdose of the depressants. So now let's go to the depressants. These slow down the activity of the central nervous system. They're called downers. And we're not, even though opioids do fit as a depressant, we're going to talk about them as their own drug class. So really, we're talking about barbiturates here, which you guys probably won't encounter barbiturates in your life. These are drugs that used to be prescribed for things like anxiety and insomnia, but they're too addictive and too harmful. And the only time these drugs are really used now in medicine is for anesthesia, if you're going in for surgery. Benzodiazepines have kind of taken over for barbiturates. These are drugs like Ambien for sleep or Lunesta for sleep, or Xanax or Valium for anxiety, Klonopin for anxiety. Those are benzodiazepines. Now, benzodiazepines can be quite addictive. And what's scary about benzodiazepines is they act synergistically with opiates. Now, I'm throwing in some new terms there. Synergistic action of drugs means that if you take like one benzo and one opioid, It's not like taking 2 pills. It's like taking 4 pills. You combine drugs and they act twice as strong. And that's why benzodiazepines are so dangerous. You can overdose and die just from benzodiazepine overdose, but more than likely, people that die on benzodiazepines are also combining them with opioids like heroin or Oxycontin. Or what's the really potent one? I'm blanking. Fentanyl. Fentanyl is kind of the really potent one that is so potent it kills everybody. Flunitrazepam, these are roofies. These and GHB, these are date rape drugs. So these drugs are generally, some people use them to party, but a lot of times these drugs are used given to people, females generally, but not always, because they kind of like make somebody like lose the ability to control their body. It makes them forget things, and it makes it so they're easy to take advantage of. So that's flunitrazepam and GHB. Those are date rape drugs. We'll come back and talk more about those in a future lecture and what you can do to kind of protect yourself if you're out at a bar in the future, in your college life or adult life, and someone offers you a drink. There's like a fingernail polish you can stir your drink with that will change colors if it's got those date rape drugs in it. And there are some other things you can do to kind of avoid becoming a victim, which is obviously an important part of this unit is helping educate you guys so you avoid becoming addicted to some of the most harmful drugs, and also so you can avoid becoming a victim of something like date rape. And then alcohol, the Quaaludes, those don't really exist very much anymore, although they can still be abused. And tranquilizers, we'll talk a little bit more about later. The other one I really want to talk about now is alcohol. Alcohol is by far the most commonly abused drug among teenagers. Well, maybe maybe nicotine would be first, but alcohol is the most. It's probably abused more than nicotine, but I don't know. That would be up in the air. But it's the most commonly abused, not just among teenagers, but in the world. And alcohol is legal. They tried to make it illegal in the 20s, and it really backfired. It led to organized crime and all that stuff. And so it's legal, but it really can be quite harmful. One thing that's interesting about alcohol that you should all be aware of is there tends to be a genetic component to alcohol addiction. So you should be aware, hopefully, of if there have been any alcoholics in your family. And if there have been, then you need to be more careful with alcohol consumption. A lot of people are able to use alcohol responsibly, but a lot of people cannot. And the only way that you'll know is what category you fall into is to look at your family history and then just be careful. There's some people that, get addicted to alcohol within a few drinks, or not a few drinks, a few times drinking. There are other people who it can take years to become addicted to alcohol. Alcohol, we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is the way alcohol impacts our mood. I want to look at this from the right side going to the left. So 1 or 2 drinks tend to give people a sense of euphoria. They feel excited, delighted, thrilled, happy, confident, connected, belonging, high self-esteem, and confident. And that's like 1 or 2 drinks for most people. The smaller people, obviously less, larger people more. A couple more drinks and you start to feel numb, really relaxed, your problems disappear, and you feel soothed. And then a few more drinks than that, and this can sometimes be like 4 drinks, but sometimes this can be like 20 drinks. People get fear, guilt, sadness, loneliness, embarrassment, shame, jealousy. People will get violent. People will get, you have people like crying. You guys eventually, if you haven't already, when you go to college, most likely you'll have friends that go through all of these stages. and you'll be there to kind of like witness it. And it's really sucks to be hanging out with somebody that's in this third stage of drunkenness. They're just no fun to be around. These would all go into the physiological effects, but you don't need to write all these down. This would be too much to write down all of them. And it kind of depends on how much you drink. So what you really want to write down is this kind of stuff here, where we got stimulants on this side and depressants on this side. So depressants slow down the messages between the body and brain. Your heart rate drops, your breathing rate decreases. And that's usually what people that die of overdose of these drugs die of, is suffocation. They just stop breathing. It decreases your reaction time. So, driving or operating any heavy machinery on depressants is very, very dangerous. What you'll find out in a second is people, alcoholics in particular, tend to die more commonly of like accidents than of alcoholism. Alcoholism will eventually kill you, but it can take years, and people that drink that much are very often in serious accidents, whether they be car accidents or just walking or biking accidents or whatever the case may be. So here's what kills people that are alcoholics. Like I said, unintentional injuries are the highest percentage. Cancer and liver cirrhosis come in next, with cardiovascular disease. So these would be alcoholics dying of the physiological effects of alcohol. This would be someone dying from just getting in an accident while they're drunk. And then also it increases the rate of suicidality. Alcohol is a depressant. It's going to make people more depressed in the long run. And unintentional or intentional injuries are a very common cause of death for alcoholics as well. You don't need to write this down. We'll go over some of these stuff in a little more detail later. Breathalyzers. I'm going to talk more about this later, so I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly today. But basically what breathalyzers do is they measure the amount of alcohol in your lungs. So your lungs end in these things called alveoli and bronchioles. And that's where gas exchange occurs. So oxygen goes from the lungs into the blood. Carbon dioxide goes from the blood into the lungs. Also water does. And alcohol also will go from the blood into the lungs. Now, the amount of alcohol that you get in your lungs is about 1/2000th of the amount of alcohol in your blood. So all they simply do is they measure the amount of alcohol in your lungs, times it by 2,000, and that's about, or 2,100 is the exact number, and that's how much alcohol you have in your blood. In order to legally drive in the state of Utah, you have to have a blood alcohol level of lower than 0.05. Until a few years ago, it was 0.08. And that was a little too high. So they changed it to 0.05. Now, how many drinks will get you to that level of alcohol? Anyone want to take a guess? 3? Bryson, for somebody your size, 3 is probably about right. This is a chart. I'll show you another chart later because it also depends on your sex. But this is a chart that shows how many drinks you can have and still be legal. Only the green is legal. So if you weigh, 100, most people can have 1 drink and be okay. Now, you weigh less than 160 pounds and you have 2 drinks, you can't drive anymore legally. You're over 180 and you have 2 drinks, you probably can still drive, but it depends on your tolerance and stuff. 3 drinks, basically nobody can drive on anymore. So what they basically did is they changed the law so that some people used to be able to have up to 4 drinks and still be able to legally drive. Now the most you can have is 2, 1 or 2, depending on your size. You have to be like 260 pounds or more to be able to have that 3rd drink, and still be legal. So One thing that happens with younger people that drink is they very rarely have one or two drinks. Older people that are more experienced with alcohol will oftentimes have one or two drinks with dinner or something, but younger people tend to engage in what we would call binge drinking. Good question, Bryson. What counts as one drink? So one drink is one beer, one shot of hard alcohol, one glass of wine, which has a higher concentration of alcohol than beer, so it's not as much volume, but it's the same amount of alcohol, or like one glass of champagne. I'm trying to think of other types of alcohol. Those are the main types. And so that would be one drink. It's just like it's uh it all equals one shot. So like one beer equals one shot. If you know what a shot glass looks like, one glass of wine equals one shot. The way that they measure your blood alcohol level is through several ways. They can use breathalyzers. Now you have to consent to a breathalyzer test if you're pulled over, but and usually what they'll do is they'll give you the sobriety test where they have you walk the line and stuff, and touch your toes, count, do the alphabet backwards, all that kind of stuff. And then if you fail that, they give you a breathalyzer. Or they might just skip to a breathalyzer if you're like visually obviously impaired. Now, if you refuse a breathalyzer, they have the right to arrest you and to get a warrant for a blood test. And so that is the second step, would be a blood test. And we'll talk more about how these work later, but basically the breathalyzers are really accurate, but they even if you fail a breathalyzer test, they'll probably do a blood test to confirm. Anyone have any questions about alcohol before we move on? We'll come back and talk more about it. I've got a lecture just on alcohol that we'll probably do, but this is kind of just an introduction. All right, looks like nobody has any questions or comments, so let's go ahead and move on. Inhalants. This is the third class. This will be the last class that we do today. And these are things that are sniffed or huffed. Now, these hit you really fast. But one thing I should probably say about these other drugs is that how fast they hit you depends on the method you use to consume it. So like if you smoke cocaine or like as crack, it's going to hit you really fast, but snorting it will hit you almost as fast. Meth is generally smoked. It's going to hit you really fast, but it can also be shot up, which will also hit you really fast. Alcohol tends to be drank, takes longer to hit you. It can take 20 minutes for you to start feeling it, and it can take an hour or more for the full effects of that alcohol to hit you. Inhalants are huffed, and they hit you immediately. And what they do is they deprive the brain and the body of oxygen, which is obviously not good. You basically are killing brain cells when you use inhalants. They're talking about people that sniff glue or paint thinner. And now many of you guys probably haven't seen anyone sniff paint thinner, but if you go to like Latin America or Central America, like Mexico City, for example, you'll see all these people that huff paint thinner, and they usually don't have very many teeth, and they really like are not doing very well. It just kills brain cells. It really can change their mental abilities. Gasoline, I don't know exactly how that's used. Laughing gas is one that back in the 1800s, people would have like laughing gas parties. I think it's pretty hard to get laughing gas these days, although you will hear of people doing whippets. That's basically the same thing as laughing gas. That is killing brain cells unless it's administered by a doctor in a clinical setting, and they don't give you enough to kill brain cells. They give you enough to kind of give you a buzz, so like you can get your teeth cleaned or get that cavity filled or get that root canal, but it's not enough to kill brain cells. And then aerosol sprays are also sometimes inhaled. So we're not going to talk a ton about inhalants. They do increase your heart rate, they kill brain cells, and they can lead to liver, lung, and kidney problems. We only have about 3 minutes left in class, guys. I don't think that is enough time to talk about hallucinogens effectively. So we'll stop here with inhalants. Uh, and I'll take any questions or comments that you guys have about any drug or poison right now. If you want to talk about it for a couple minutes, or if you just want to sign off and be done for the day, because that's 4 straight hours of Zooming for you guys. I get it. Oh, where does weed go? Good question. And I'm sure you're not the only person that wants to know that. So weed is actually categorized in this next category that we're about to get to, and that is as a hallucinogen. Now, that's cannabis right here is also called weed. It is oftentimes not hallucinogenic. It does not always make people hallucinate. You have to take really, really high doses to hallucinate. But because it can cause hallucinations, it is called a hallucinogen. Um, Cannabis is one we'll talk more about. I don't want to get into too much detail because we only have 2 minutes, but cannabis is a really interesting one because I'll just talk about it for a moment. Basically, in the 70s and 80s, the government really demonized marijuana, and they made it illegal to study the effects of marijuana. So it was demonized like worse than like almost any other drug. Um, And so there's not a lot of research about the effects of marijuana. Now, just recently that has changed. It's become legal in a lot of states. Most states, it's legal medicinally. Um, and in a lot of states, it's legal recreationally as well, because it tends not to be as harmful as alcohol. Now, that is not always the case. It will give you lung cancer. It will, it's just like smoking cigarettes. There's no filter. It can even be worse. People don't tend to smoke marijuana as much as they smoke cigarettes. Like, as far as like people that smoke cigarettes will literally um, smoke like they're called chain smokers because it's like a chain. They're just putting a cigarette to their mouth every second. People don't smoke marijuana that way, but people will smoke, up to like, 5 joints a day or more. And that is going to really damage your lungs. The most harmful drug, um, in my opinion, are the opiates, is heroin, and OxyContin and those drugs. Um, they will kill you faster than anything else. Now, meth probably leads to the most criminal behavior, but that is not always true. People on meth do crimes. People that are withdrawing from like heroin or oxycodone or OxyContin, they will commit crimes to get the drug because the withdrawal symptoms are so terrible that they literally feel like they're going to die if they don't have it. So, how many people can actually say alphabet backwards sober? I don't know. See, that's a good question. I always wonder if I got pulled over, like, because me and my brother one time were we drove all the way home from Palm Springs in one day. And he got pulled over for drunk driving at like 2 in the morning. Now, neither of us were drunk. We were just tired. But if they asked us to recite the alphabet backwards, I'd just be like, hey, give me the breathalyzer. I can't do that. I don't know. Fentanyl is a opioid. So fentanyl is just like a more potent version of oxycodone or heroin. It will kill you with a lower dose, but it kills you the same way as those drugs, and they can kill you in one use. Um, we'll talk more about those drugs. Really, are the ones we're going to focus on the most are really those opioids, just because they are so harmful and so addictive. And um, I don't want to have any students die of opioid overdose. That would be one of my goals as a teacher. Good. Any other questions? You guys can sign off now. It's 11:50, so class is officially over. I'll stay on for a few minutes to answer any questions that you might have, but we'll talk about it later too. So, because if it's really interesting, a lot of people will want to hear it. Yeah. Yeah, Colin. Oh, saying bye. See ya. Have a good one, guys.